Thank you for joining this webinar on understanding workplace incivility in athletic training. Before starting this course, I encourage you to access your organization's policies on incivility. Hi, my name is Dr. Carrie Graham, and as a certified and licensed athletic trainer for over 20 years and researcher of athletic training workplace culture, I will help you explore workplace incivility from an individual, team, or group and organizational perspective. Part of understanding incivility requires that we understand and acknowledge our positionality. In qualitative research, positionality has been identified as how your identity influences and potentially biases your understanding of your environment and experiences. So with that definition, my positionality is that I am an over 45-year-old African-American woman who grew up in New England. I have worked as an athletic trainer in a public high school, at 2 Division I athletic departments, and as an athletic training professor at 2 institutions. Given the definition of positionality, take a moment to reflect and write down your positionality. Doing so will help you frame how you think about topics discussed in this presentation. The objectives for this webinar are to clarify your understanding of civility and incivility in the workplace, explore the impact of incivility on individuals, departmental teams, and the workplace as an organization. There will be an opportunity to critique your workplace culture. The hope is that you will understand how to identify uncivil behavior and understand why it is occurring. Ultimately, the goal is to help you create a workplace that welcomes and supports all individuals. Detailed strategies for how to address incivility will be presented in Part 2 of this webinar series. Let's start with a scenario that fits a number of athletic training settings. We will revisit the scenarios later, but for now, let's consider this. We have a department director, Frank, an administrative assistant, Maureen, and 7 members of the staff. During a meeting, the staff was discussing ways to increase patient satisfaction while maintaining or decreasing departmental costs. After a lively debate between Frank, Carl, Michael, and Jim about increasing patient satisfaction, Maria shares a key factor not previously mentioned as to why patient satisfaction has recently decreased. During this time, everyone was focused on their cell phones and laptops. Immediately, Dave repeats Maria's statement using her exact words, to which Frank, Carl, and Michael identify Dave's insight as great, insightful, and a testament to his expertise. What do you think? Are there one or more instances of incivility occurring? Take a moment to reflect. Let's consider another scenario. In the hallway, Dr. Jack Lee was speaking with Nurse Daniela Horowitz about checking in the next patient. PA Patricia Davis walked up to Dr. Lee and Nurse Daniela, turned her back to Dr. Lee, and started a conversation with Daniela about their weekend plans without saying "excuse me" or waiting until Dr. Lee was finished speaking. That afternoon, Dr. Lee sends out an email to all employees about an upcoming workshop and the external audit occurring in 2 months. At the end of the email, Dr. Lee includes the following statement: all nurses and physician assistants should never interrupt a doctor who is speaking, especially about non-work related things. Unless a patient's life is at risk, anyone violating this policy will be officially reprimanded and formally warned. What do you think? Are there one or more instances of incivility occurring? Take a moment to reflect on this scenario. Now that we've reviewed 2 scenarios, what is your definition of civility and incivility? Again, it is important that you acknowledge your point of reference and positionality to gain insight. In published work by Pearson, Anderson, and Porith, They identified and defined workplace civility as behavior directed toward another individual that is courteous and polite. In essence, this behavior demonstrates respect toward another individual. Civility goes beyond tolerance because tolerance does not demonstrate appreciation, acknowledgement, or respect. For example, I tolerate North Carolina heat. I don't appreciate it nor respect it, and try not to acknowledge it when it exists. They identified incivility is demonstrated as rude behavior that disregards another individual or their ideas. In essence, uncivil behavior diminishes opportunities for interpersonal empathy. Incivility contributes to the exclusion and invalidation of individuals and/or their ideas. In addition to Pearson et al., scholars such as Shilpan, DePater, and Ayres, as well as Rahim and Cosby, found that incivility is often presented as subtle with low intensity and is ambiguous. Victims and bystanders of incivility report that the interaction was uncomfortable in the moment and upon reflection was quite disrespectful. Incivility can be presented by various people in the workplace. In healthcare, there's also the chance of our customers or patients demonstrating this behavior. Uncivil behavior can be verbal as well as nonverbal. In the end, incivility is costly to the individual, the group or team, and the organization because it results in decreased work performance, employee burnout, and employee turnover. While incivility is described as low intensity and ambiguous, there are times when uncivil behavior includes high intensity and is overt in nature. Here is a quote by Bar David, who expands the definition of incivility. Incivility creates a spiral effect, where one type of incivility breeds other forms of the same. In healthcare, rudeness plays a pivotal role due to its negative impact, which goes beyond the heart of service delivery. She identifies a critical implication of incivility is that it has a spiraling effect and it breeds other forms of uncivil behavior. Horwath and Pearson identified the concept of incivility in 1995 as having low intensity and ambiguous in nature. However, in their subsequent work and the research findings from other scholars, incivility has also been described as belittling and invalidating, verbal as well as nonverbal communications, rude, has a disregard and disrespect in nature, it excludes and it also mistreats, and it is conducted online as well as in public. From this list of terms, you can understand the variations of uncivil behavior. One challenge of identifying incivility is its intensity and ambiguity, because what one person perceives as uncivil behavior may not be equally perceived by another individual. Perceptions are often guided by our cognitive assessment. Variables that can challenge the perception of uncivil behavior in the workplace are first, an informal work culture. For example, sports-related athletic training rooms are often seen and managed as informal spaces. Some may perceive the use of derogatory language as acceptable, while others may perceive it as uncivil behavior. We also have to consider the differences across personal cultures that may be grounded in religion, country, or region. Violations of cultural norms may be blatant, but can also be subtle. For example, speaking or playing music while someone is praying can be perceived as uncivil behavior. Perception is also guided by our beliefs. Past social and personal experiences influence how we make meaning of the world around us. As we experience behavior, our ability to synthesize the experience and assign meaning to it help individuals decide if behavior is civil or uncivil. Another factor to consider is the frequency of the behavior. In some cases, when there is a one-time demonstration of uncivil behavior, the behavior may be perceived or dismissed as coincidental or rare. But if the behavior occurs frequently, it suggests intentionality, which can be perceived as incivility. Self-concept can also contribute to one's perception of uncivil behavior. In this case, self-concept is how one answers the question, who am I? It includes ideas of our past, present, and future self, as well as self-esteem. It is the idea of who we believe we are. If someone perceives they do not have a voice or deserve to exercise their voice, this can potentially make them susceptible to uncivil behavior. Let's take some time now to identify those individuals who are often the target of workplace incivility. To appreciate who these individuals are, you must first acknowledge who is often at the center of our society and/or organization. The people at the center of society and/or our organizations are those who have official, social, or perceived power, authority, or both. In other cases, those individuals at the center hold a valued position or have an identity that is often centralized and viewed as the accepted norm. Keep in mind that uncivil behavior can be directed horizontally and vertically. When we think about potential targets of incivility, they often are individuals who are positioned at the margins of our society or within our organization. Remember, uncivil behavior can be directed horizontally or vertically. One key target of uncivil behavior are individuals who are identified by their ethnicity, age, sexual or gender identity, religious beliefs, or citizenship. Their identity may position them to be underrepresented within the organization or department. For example, being the only woman on an all-men staff, or being a Muslim individual working in the Christian Bible Belt of the southeastern United States may position those individuals as targets of incivility. Another targeted person of uncivil behavior are entry-level employees because they maintain a subordinate positionality that holds little to no power or authority. In addition, those individuals who hold non-traditional roles, for example, having a young Pakistani lesbian woman as the head athletic trainer or program director when that position has traditionally been held by an older white heterosexual man. These individuals are viewed as challenging tradition and therefore the target of uncivil behavior. In contrast to uncivil behavior being directed horizontally and vertically, healthcare clinicians are also targets of uncivil behavior from patients and clients. While their healthcare positionality may be grounded in providing service, if a patient is unhappy, frustrated, or perceives their healthcare provider as incompetent, they also have been reported as demonstrating uncivil behavior. Nursing research has explored this issue extensively. Who are the people in your workplace that may be targets of incivility? Every work environment is susceptible to incivility. The corporate sector, educational institutions, healthcare agencies, and sport organizations. What do you think civility and incivility look like in these work settings? Consider who the potential perpetrators, victims, and bystanders may be. Here are some examples of incivility across each setting. In the corporate, business, or administrative sector, civility can be demonstrated as the inclusion of all individuals equally in the decision-making process. whereas incivility can be illustrated as not sharing needed resources with a coworker or excluding individuals from critical conversations or social gatherings. In educational settings, civility can be illustrated by the educators welcoming all students' ideas and treating their ideas with equal respect or appreciation. Incivility may be demonstrated by the professor who only acknowledges the ideas of the men in a science or math class. An example in healthcare is the mutual and equal respect among all healthcare providers. This would illustrate civility. Patients and customers displaying uncivil behavior when they are rude toward their healthcare provider would suggest incivility. Or one or more healthcare providers excludes another from social conversations and gatherings. And in sports organizations, a civil work environment is one where all individuals, people across religious beliefs, sexual and gender identities, ethnic cultures, etc., are welcome and acknowledged as adding value to the overall team's success. An uncivil sports-affiliated work environment is one where all individuals are not welcome or excluded. In some cases, they are tolerated to be present, but are not treated with respect or valued. So let's apply these examples to our two scenarios. In this scenario, incivility is demonstrated as exclusion. This aims to separate an individual from the central group. The scenario also demonstrates invalidation behaviors, which are those that nullify or ignore an individual's existence, ideas, or value to the central group. First, Frank, Carl, Michael, and Jim are engaged in a lively discussion which excludes the women's voices who are present. Next, Maria, who is the only ethnically diverse staff member and the only woman who offers an opinion, her comments and ideas are not acknowledged by her colleagues. However, when Dave repeats Maria's statement using her exact words, the idea was then offered as being insightful. In this case, Maria's presence as well as her ideas have been invalidated or nullified. Scenario 2 illustrates furtive behavior. Furtive behaviors include such things as eye-rolling, gossiping, muttering derogatory comments, as well as social exclusion. In face-to-face instances, furtive behavior includes public ridicule, over-talking someone, as well as cutting a conversation short. Whereas in an online presence, this behavior is demonstrated through passive-aggressive emails, non-response to emails, or posting disparaging comments online. This scenario has multiple cases of incivility, such as blatant interruptions and social exclusion, which were perpetrated by Patricia Davis. Here, Patricia's uncivil behavior was both verbal, she cut off a conversation and started talking about something different, as well as nonverbal. She turned her back to Dr. Lee. Yet Dr. Lee responds with different but equally uncivil behavior. Here, he uses his position via his online presence to passive-aggressively and indirectly address one staff member's behavior. Let's consider federal guidelines as part of our discussion on incivility in the workplace. The United States Department of Labor's policy on workplace violence is to promote a safe environment for our employees and visiting public, and to work with our employees to maintain a work environment that is free from violence, harassment, intimidation, and other disruptive behavior. The department's position in this area is that violence or threats of violence in all forms is unacceptable behavior. The premise of the DOL's position initially focused on federal work environments, but now this position on uncivil behavior has been adopted by many other agencies and organizations across the country. The United States Equal Opportunity Commission is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee because of the person's race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, gender identity, or sexual orientation, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information. It is also illegal to retaliate against or treat a person uncivilly because they complained about discrimination, filed a charge of discrimination, or participated in an employment discrimination investigation or lawsuit. In 2017, Commissioner Feldblum connected workplace incivility to workplace harassment and violence by saying, "We know that workplace incivility often acts as a gateway drug to workplace harassment." In 1970, the Occupational Safety and Health Act was voted into law to ensure companies assured safe and healthy physical workspaces for employees. However, since that time, OSHA has included addressing civility and incivility as part of its mission. The American Medical Association also supports civility in health and medical workspaces. This is evident by their statement, "We must do everything we can to protect the health and well-being of our healthcare workers." Now that we've considered the definition of civility and incivility, reviewed policy statements by governing agencies, let's consider the impact of workplace incivility on any individual person, the team of individuals, and the organization. When we consider who is impacted by incivility, DeMarco, Fawcett, and Mizrahi found the victims of uncivil behaviors reported experiencing physiological problems such as sleep disturbances, digestive disruptions, and decreased cognitive function. They've also reported experiencing psychological problems such as an increase in anxiety and depression. But victims are not the only individuals impacted by incivility. In addition to DeMarco et al., Martinez and Eisenberg identified that bystanders are also impacted by workplace incivility and were reported as experiencing emotional trauma. In the case of top management teams, witnesses to uncivil leadership behavior felt that calling the leader out could result in retaliatory behavior. Both victims and bystanders experienced reduced job satisfaction as well as a reduction in organizational commitment. But if we consider Barr-David's statement that incivility creates a spiral effect where one type of incivility breeds other forms of incivility, we see that both the victim as well as bystanders have an increase in aggression as well as disruptive behaviors. The impact of incivility goes beyond workplace interpersonal interactions. Mao Chang Johnson and Son, as well as Porth and Pearson, found that 48% of the individuals who are the victims and bystanders of incivility intentionally decreased their work effort, whereas 47% intentionally decreased the time spent at work, and 38% intentionally decreased the quality of their work, while 66% acknowledged that their overall work performance had declined. While there is an impact of incivility on individuals, there is also an impact on the team or work group. As we acknowledge that victims and bystanders make up our organizational work groups, we have to consider that when uncivil behaviors are present, there are implications of incivility on the entire work group. Teams have reported that when there is an increase in incivility, there is an increase of group bullying, absenteeism, and violence. In essence, within-group perpetrators can direct their behavior above, below, and laterally. The impact of incivility on work groups is illustrated by Barr-David's statement that the spiraling effect of incivility breeds additional uncivil behaviors, which contributes to the creation of negative workplace culture. The impact of the team exceeds that of the individual in this case. Here, 47% of individuals intentionally decreased the time spent at work, 63% lost time avoiding the offender, and 12% of individuals stated that they left their job because of uncivil within-group treatment. In this case, the impact of uncivility becomes pervasive beyond the team and spreads to the organization. As victims and bystanders experience physical and psychological problems, and work groups experience an increase in bullying, the organization itself experiences a decrease in quality of care, decrease in employee and customer satisfaction, and an increase in service errors, employee attrition, and organizational costs. To illustrate the organizational costs, Mao, Chang, Johnson & Son, as well as Porth and Pearson identified that 38% of the individuals had a decrease in their quality of work, and 66% reported a decrease in their performance. Another significant impact is that 25% of employees impacted by incivility admitted to taking their frustration out on customers or clients. One of the greatest impacts of incivility to an organization is the loss of employee work time and their decision to leave their job. The decreases in employee performance and increase in employee time loss can have a major impact on an organization's costs. If we recall, 12% of study participants reported leaving their job, which contributes to organizational turnover. So when we think about the cost of hiring employees, Mao, Chang, Johnson & Son identified that these costs can range from 30 to 400% of the offering salary. This cost can be substantial. In 2010, Porth and Pearson identified that incivility costs an organization, on average, $14,000 per employee. Now that we've defined incivility and consider the overall impact of incivility on the victim, the bystander, and the organization, we can appreciate the importance of understanding and identifying uncivil behavior in the workplace. So now is the time for you to do a critical assessment. During this time, I will pose critical questions to help you assess your workplace culture. I encourage you to use this time to look for resources, if you haven't done so already, on your organization's website so that you can understand how your organization governs incivility. First, let's take 3 minutes to do a self-assessment. We've talked about positionality earlier on, but I'd like you to review your positionality. For number 2, consider the physiological and psychological implications of those individuals that have been the victim, bystander, or perpetrator of incivility. What impact has your behavior had on your colleagues? And what impact has your behavior had on your departmental productivity? Now, let's take some time for you to do a workplace assessment. Have you witnessed incivility in your workplace? What was it? It's important that you name the behavior. Reflect on the insidiousness and subtlety of the different forms of incivility. Who were the perpetrators of incivility in your workplace? And how has incivility affected your organizational costs? You may not know the dollar amount, however, you can anecdotally appreciate that there's a decrease in performance, there is some burnout, or turnover. Another part of doing a workplace assessment around incivility involves doing a reporting assessment. Does your workplace use policies and practices to prevent incivility? What are they? And are these policies on reporting incivility? And is it clear what those policies are? Are there clear procedures to, in fact, report incivility? And what are the procedures? Now that you can identify uncivil behavior and understand its implications on an individual, group, and organization, you should begin to feel empowered to address incivility in the workplace. Here are a few basic tips to help you address incivility. First, consistently demonstrate civil behavior. Also, when attempting to appropriately address incivility, consider your positionality and appreciate that others may have a different frame of reference or positionality than you. Address and assess the type of behavior being exerted. Is it respectful and includes the ideas of everyone equally, or does it exclude some voices, invalidates some identities, or is it generally disrespectful? Do not criticize the person, but rather focus your comments on the behavior. Acknowledge the problematic impact of uncivil behavior on the victim, bystander, group, and organization, which includes patients and clients. And lastly, use your organization's policies and procedures to report incivility. In closing, thank you for joining this webinar on understanding incivility in the workplace for athletic training, where we've clarified your understanding of civility and incivility, explored the impact of incivility on individuals, groups, and organizations, and you've critiqued your current workplace culture. In the second part of this series, I will discuss strategic ways to address incivility in the workplace. Again, this is Dr. Carrie Graham, and thank you.